Good evening and welcome to the Manetti Shrem Museum. My name is Jordan and I'm a Visitor Services student staff member. Before we begin tonight's program, we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which UC Davis sits. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Quetzaldihi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzaldihi Wintun Nation, and Yochadihi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We are wildly excited to be here today and absolutely delighted. Good afternoon. My name is Annabeth Rosen. I'm the current co-chair of the Department of Art and Art History, and on behalf of all the faculty and students of the department and the California studio, we warmly welcome everyone. That was Jordan Ridge, who is one of the students who work at the museum. So we're very grateful to her for opening our program this afternoon. We are here to mark a momentous occasion. Today we celebrate the first Spotlight Artist public lecture of the California studio. The California studio housed in the glorious, world-renowned Department of Art and Art History at UC Davis, one of the most prestigious universities in the country, increasingly known for its expanding commitment to the arts. Today, we warmly and most enthusiastically welcome the fabulous Raúl de Nieves. The California studio brings a group of internationally renowned artists annually to the Department of Art and Art History that, since its founding in 1958, has been a powerful force in the art world. We are deeply grateful and profoundly inspired by the generosity of Maria Manetti Shrem and Jan Shrem for their awe-inspiring gift. Mrs. Manetti Shrem is dedicated to the arts and to UC Davis. In her travels around the world, Mrs. Manetti Shrem is one of our greatest ambassadors. We are thrilled to have Mrs. Manetti Shrem here with us this afternoon. A round of applause, please. Along with the Manetti Shrems, there are many people to whom we offer our thanks for their hard work and continuous support. And I'll tell you their names and we can salute them together. This program would not exist without the creative and steadfast commitment of art studio alum from 1976, Ken Monens. Ken is the ideal collaborator. We are most appreciative. Thank you so much. And to my unparalleled colleagues in the Department of Art Studio, Professors Young Su, Shiva Ahmadi, Tim Hyde, Gina Werfel, Robin Hill, Hearn Pardee, Darren Martin, and Graham McDougall. The advisory board of the California studio, we thank for their perceptive skills and wise counsel. Ralph Hexter, Ari Kelman, Michael Villalobos, and Branwyn Opaco. Founding director of the Manetti Shrem Museum, our co-sponsor, Rachel Teagle, and curator, Susie Cantor. And to Dean Estella Ataquana, our new dean, who was so wise to be moved to UC Davis this fall after COVID with the beginning of California Studio, a most auspicious event. To the incomparable triad of Charlene Madison, Karen Ostergaard, and Katie Gruby, whose imagination and expertise have built this program from the ground up. These women are incredible. You have our deep appreciation and our grateful thanks, all of you. Please allow me to introduce Professor Young Soo, who's the graduate advisor, and he in turn will introduce Raúl.
As you know, if you are at UC Davis, it takes about 10 different people until you get to the actual event. So I'm only the third person. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here with us. And it's so great to see such a large crowd in person. I thought our existence had permanently been reduced to a little box on the screen. It is so wonderful to be reassured that we all have a body below our head, and so we can actually move around and bump into each other. I'm Young Soo, and I'm the graduate advisor in the art studio program here at UC Davis, and it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Raúl de Nieves. His lecture is part of our new artist in residence program that Annabeth mentioned a little bit, the California Studio Artist in Residence program. With incredible support and blessing of Mrs. Manetti Schramm, the art studio program has developed the California Studio program to invite 4 artists in a year. To create a long-term engagement with our students and the Davis community. We had our first lecture last week with Tamara Toon as the first teaching artist in residence, who is currently teaching our undergrad and graduate students this fall. Today's speaker, Raúl de Nieves, is our first spotlight artist in residence who is visiting us for 10 days to work on a performance project with our students and share his artistic practice with the general public in this lecture. His collaborative performance will be on view on Tuesday evening at the Wyatt Theater. If you're interested, you can visit the California Studio website. Raúl de Nieves is an artist who defies a single identity, but creates something wildly enchanting and terrifying at the same time. His many rainbow-hued creations, such as colored plastic film that covers the entire glass wall of the Whitney Museum, high heels adorned with colorful beads that grows tentacles, furry human-like creatures and animals encrusted with beads and pearls create the mythical world of pleasure and pain. His artistic technique is simple and domestic, but the resulting work is spiritual and sublime, but persistently real, as if they were spirits in search of human experience. Born in Morelia, Mexico, and moved to the United States at the age of 9, he is also a product of the San Francisco's vibrant art community in the Mission District before he moved to New York. Raúl de Nieves is a 2017 participant of the Whitney Biennial, and his work has been exhibited in many institutions such as the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles, Cleveland Museum of Art, Deitch Project, Los Angeles, MoMA PS1, among many. In 2017, his first opera creation, The Fool, was presented in the Kitchen, New York. Currently, his solo exhibition, Raúl de Nieves, The Treasure House of Memory, is on view at the Institute of Contemporary Art, Boston. And another piece of good news just came in yesterday. Raúl is awarded the prestigious Joe Mitchell Foundation Fellowship this year. Congratulations. Please give a warm welcome to our speaker, Raúl de Nieves.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for all of your attendance. It is a pleasure to see so many faces. This is a real honor for me to be here to really just understand how far one can go with the idea of a dream, but a dream that actually is a reality that all of us can meet. That introduction that you did was really beautiful, and sometimes I just forget about all these things that have happened in my life, because I think sometimes when you wake up and the dream is really just taking on its own toll, you are asked to kind of remember where you started and where you are now, and maybe where you might want to be tomorrow. But most of those times, there's very little of how you can express that. To me, becoming an artist was something that I didn't think could be possible. But I think with the belief of where I came from really kind of gave me an understanding of the idea of possibility and accessibility, and that things really do exist in the world when you put a lot of love and care. I was born in 1983 in Morelia, Michoacan, to a family of 2 other children. My mother is my hero. She can't be here right now, but she's in San Diego. She, since the beginning, has taught me how beautiful life can be and how fragile things can be. Our father passed away when we were really young, and in a way of seeing the sorrow within my family, it kind of started to create this relationship of not wanting to hold back, but to kind of like really just exude to a better tomorrow. To me, life really does show those different aspects of life, because you never know what to expect. But when something like a loss happens, where do you begin and what takes you there? Growing up, we used to go to church, and church became such a interesting place for me to kind of express this idea of belief. Growing up, knowing that I was a different person because of my way of thinking and the way that I wanted to express myself as a person in a body that was considered to be a homosexual, made me think that I wasn't accepted in these places of worship where we would go and create this idea of giving up the struggles of life to ask for a better day. So in a way, I never wanted that kind of life to be taken away from me, to be told that I didn't belong here. So in a way, I started to kind of maybe realize that I had to make my own decisions and create my own communities, find my own paths, but still continue to believe. As you see here, you see a Christ in sorrow and pain, full of wounds. I think that's who we are every day. These sculptures to me are so beautiful because they're so scary. People come and worship these things made out of wood. People touch them. They put belief on them. But then the belief is taken away by the idea of society. So it's almost like pushing itself back into the ground and asking you to not be a part of it. And it's something that's always registered in my mind. I remember being a child and trying to belong to a youth group, and someone was questioning what my backpack had because it said Marilyn Manson. And I was actually told that I was going to go to hell. I cried because I didn't really believe in that. And the minute I told my mom that, it's almost like she woke up too and was like, nobody should ever talk to you like this, Raúl. So it's something that kind of really has kept with me and given me the power to kind of fully see myself. The community in Mexico is so vibrant because they share their life. Each person is special for one thing or many things, but you kind of want to be the best at what it is that you want to do. It's a beauty of wanting to be a part of something and to be believed that your tomatoes might taste better than somebody else's, but maybe it's because of the presentation or your smile. Unfortunately, we can't see each other's smiles today because of these masks, but I'm totally full of joy. And it's just so crazy to think back at these moments of my life when I grew up and remembering the colors and the way that things were shared. I remember seeing these beautiful folkloric dances that really captivated me for so many years, to see these groups of families pass on these traditions that were so special to one another, that really brought all these families together to really enjoy. And the idea of passing on these traditions became so prominent to me. When I moved to San Diego, I started to believe that there was something that you could find, which was a form of community, because that's something that I felt like I had lost after leaving Mexico. So performance really became a way of me to finding that way to express myself, to really believe that you could create these hubs. Actually, in the UCSD campus, there's still there, this artist-run space called Shea Cafe that really showed me the idea of community, that everyone was able to come and express themselves in this way that maybe you couldn't otherwise. Music is kind of that freedom that we have of life, or this idea of performing, because it really pushes you to kind of like create space, to think about what you want to say and do. Through the idea of performance, I have been able to kind of create larger than life artworks that do accumulate people. And this is something we're trying to do here with a group of students. Being here, having these conversations with the students and seeing how you can pass down freedom is something that I think we forget that we are capable of. Art making is about sharing ideas. Sometimes it's really hard to kind of grasp on what it is, but I think the moment you let go of yourself, it opens up the brain into a larger picture. When I felt like I was lost once again, I kind of went back to thinking about religion and what it meant to kind of believe, and to put myself back somewhere where I felt I didn't belong. The image of St. George and the Dragon has always resonated in my practice. And I think the reason why this image has haunted me for so many years in my life, when I felt like I didn't belong or I couldn't, it was because I didn't know what I was afraid of. I was still searching for an idea and wanting to see this fear. In the story of St. George, this dragon is portrayed as the most foul aspect of life. It wants what you want. It wants what you have, but it also needs something to be given to. To me, the dragon doesn't signify that. The dragon actually is the ultimate fear that we run away from, the feeding of the mind that we don't want to see. So in a way, looking back at this image gave me this form of understanding that I could fully find a way to express myself, to use something so classical to push my own way into believing. It actually kind of taught me how to paint. I didn't go to art school like you guys did because I didn't have the means to be able to do that. And I think about that moment when I decided not to do that, and I felt a little bit like a failure, because there's a moment of how society puts you in a corner. But somehow, the image of St. George became like my ultimate teacher. It guided me to understanding that I was able to reproduce the image in whatever form I wanted, and to believe that maybe something inside of this image, I could really find the actual borders of life, to really conquer them, and to finally one day shake hands with that idea of fear. The image went on to be painted in my practice, I don't know how many times, maybe like 20 or 30, until a couple of years ago, I saw this image be projected onto a building in Boston that's now standing for 7 years. This picture I painted in San Francisco when I felt like I didn't have a voice in the art world, but now standing in front of it makes me think about all of the things that I went through in order to continue to believe and never feel like there was a moment of ending. It's really just so crazy to think about those moments when I sat in my room by myself trying to paint these little squares, and now they live in a city. Sculpture became a point of vision when I started to decide that I wanted to become a part of my work once again, to really enter it, and to look around the things in my life that were actually pushing me to believe that I didn't have to search so hard. My footwear or the idea of self-adornment or the way that I dress still felt very punk. And I think that kind of gave me a sensibility of self-love. My shoes became almost like tokens of moments of my life. When I moved to New York, I remember throwing these shoes away and the next day going back to the trash can to pull them out, to when I come to New York, someone asking me when they do a studio visit, what's that sculpture on the floor? And I was like, that's just my dirty shoes. Someone actually pointed that that was something that I could use to believe in because I had already put all this energy into it. It was really strange for me to kind of like use their guidance, but that was the thing. I didn't really know that this was something I had. And I want to listen. I'm always trying to figure out how to ask for help, how to ask questions, and how to listen so that I can actually see something that maybe I'm missing. The shoe then started to grow into this idea of accumulation. And now, after so many years, I realized that the act of accumulating beads is a timeline. Like the time that I spend putting these beads together to create these shapes is almost like the act of emotion. The shoes were wearable at one point, and I still felt that maybe at that moment I was hitting a wall by trying to create something that I could actually really engulf myself into. So the idea of letting go became another aspect of how to make work. Within the idea, they started to grow into these monstrous-like situations, but full of beauty. And when I think about this, it's almost like bacteria coming together and forming its own soul. At this moment of my practice, I was still trying to figure out how to kind of get myself into a situation, and it wasn't really working. But actually, the idea of self-promotion within myself took me to places where the fashion world started to kind of like look at my work. And it was very uncomfortable because there was the obscurity of, are you trying to design or are you trying to make work? And a lot of people told me that I was making mistakes by letting the fashion world use my artwork. But I think it was actually really beautiful. This photograph was shot by Karl Lagerfeld, and he is one of the most iconic designers of our time who passed away. And obviously my work clashing with this idea of reality, I think is what it was trying to ask me to do. At that moment, I wanted to kind of take away this idea of wearability and let the work really become more about myself again and find a new meaning. So the work started to become more like obscure in a sense of understanding. The shoe has still become something that I think about often because it really does have a lot of meaning to who we are and how it changes the person that it is. You know, every time you put on a new pair of shoes, it gives you a form, it gives you a structure, but it gives you also a path. Within those works, I've allowed to see them grow into these objects that I think are objects of desire. They're things that can't be touched because sometimes this is something we're trying to attain, can't be worn, but it's still this idea of a wearable shoe. Soon after, I started to think about how I really could become not just a part of the floor, but engulf my whole body back into the artwork. Costumes were the next point of reference. And I was reminding myself of those moments when I saw the old men dancing on the streets and how all these cultures create these beautiful guards that represent who they are. I was still trying to find who I was as a person. And for me, this idea of craft became something so prominent within my practice. Using things, once again, that were so readily available, like old pantyhose, yarn, hot glue guns, the most accessible materials to be able to experiment in a way that I could allow myself to fully understand how to break these boundaries of traditionality, how to continue to think that tradition is an aspect of what I want to be a part of, but to create a new language for myself and for others. The costumes became so important in my practice that they started to go back into these performances where we would destruct public spaces in this way of like pure joy, but it was something that actually made people uncomfortable. The uncomfortableness was something that I think also became part of how to, because it actually was giving me an understanding to just want to be and to let go. It took so long to kind of get to this place because I was still searching for a voice. And it's almost like putting on these costumes sometimes made me feel like I was back in disguise and trying to be or search. The works are so important to me now because they've taught me so much ways of how I can present the way I make things, but also to engulf myself back into my own self and in my practice. Soon after, I started to go back into the beadwork and thinking about how to use time once again to form a body. This work is really special to me because it took me about 7 years to make. It's a life-size rendering of a child. Its name is Days of Wonder, which is the name of my mother's daycare. Working on this piece really showed me the idea of failure and that things might not even work. But with that in mind, having this work really exist, it was the only way that I could understand how the core of things could happen. To see it fail, it was actually one of the most exciting things that I could experience, because for many years I would put this thing away in a box. My friends would ask me, "Where's the baby?" And I'd be like, "He's back up on the loft, hidden." Yeah, it sounds really weird, but I started to pull its limbs apart and understand that within time I would find its own structure. But the idea of never giving up was something that I kind of wanted to just see within the work. Maybe it wasn't even going to work, but the day that it felt like it worked, it actually changed my life, because I felt like I believed in something that was really showing me a mark of time, a mark of the idea of not wanting to be, the mark of failureness, the destruction of, my own sorrow. It's really beautiful to see this work, even in this picture, because this work now lives in a box once again, and I take it out for very special occasions or exhibitions, which is something that I tell my mom, like, a lot of people try to put us in a box, and it's up to us to come out when we want to. And that's something that she kind of sometimes reminds me that I remind her, that I told her. Within that work, the idea of construction has become even more, I think, beyond. Like, now I am ready, and it's like these monster, human-like creatures are so joyous to me. But the idea of joy doesn't just come with a smile. I think back at the moments when I realized that sorrow was the most important aspect of how to, because I wanted to feel the idea of making myself feel good. My art practice really has derived from the idea of the true self mirrored. Every day is different. Every time I put a bead down, it's almost like a new emotion. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad, but there's a moment when things really do shine through. And the intuitive aspect of making work without planning kind of gives me the sense of believing that these creatures do exist in this world. This is a work that I just finished for the ICA Boston that I made during quarantine. It took me almost the whole entire 2 years to finally see it realized. When I think about this work, I think about the way we tell stories, and that the story continues to grow the more and more you kind of put back into it. Working on this during quarantine kind of gave me this idea of thinking of how one could really become that hero, to think back about that story of St. George and ask myself, what aspect of that painting am I? Am I the horse? Am I the serpent? Am I the angel? Or am I the victim? I feel like we're all of them in one image. I feel like time really has given me that aspect to believe. Now the works stand outdoors, greeted by people, which is something so beautiful. When I put this out at the Highline, this work has been an aspect of this idea that things do belong outside. And also to believe that the relationships that come into our world don't necessarily need to happen immediately. The curator of the Highline I've known for over 10 years. And to understand that within those 10 years, they saw my practice and at one point decided to ask me to be a part of something, it was the moment for me to be in this experience. I couldn't have done this 9 or 7 years ago because I didn't have the process or the idea to believe. I was still searching. And now it's almost like they're taking over their entire self. It's beautiful to see people interact with the work. It's almost like the costume that's now sitting on a bench is waiting for you to greet it. It has no movement, but it has a life. Another kind of amazing aspect of the idea of how to reinvent yourself is through, once again, this idea of materiality. To search around and to think of things that you can find to create new narratives. Stained glass, I think, still goes back to this idea of the traditionality of how we see work. I started making these facades of stained glass as an act of decoration, not knowing what they would do, but just kind of using this act of craft once again. It's almost like going to school and learning how to make something out of nothing. And when I see these things now, I didn't even understand that they could push me out to believe that my work could really take over space, command, but it's all because of the opportunities that have been granted. This is my Whitney Biennial exclusion, which I was asked to create the mural. When the curators invited me to be part of the show, they actually were the ones that pushed me to think that I could do this. And without their help, I might have never seen this kind to fruition, which is something really beautiful because even in the narrative of this mural, there is a character that is asking for help, but is sick, and this fly follows him everywhere. It's in a fragility of life, dancing through memories. Who would we be without our memories is something I ask myself. Like, what would my life be without the idea of my father dying and seeing my mom continue her life and give us the joy. In a way, this experience really gave me the ability to believe that I can't do things by myself. I need all of you. I need myself. I need my mom. I need my friends. I need my community. Even though that this was something I created with very little help from others, it was a struggle of almost climbing that mountain. And once I got to the mountain, it's almost like I needed to fall back down. It's like the fool. You don't want to fall, and you always have a dog following you around. The works have really shown me that they can actually live beyond spaces, and the accumulation of the other objects really create a beautiful narrative that doesn't really need to have a full closure. Within that, it's almost like I've learned how to create something that I didn't really think I could. This was made for a gallery show, and seeing it be a ceiling once, and now it can continue to change. It's almost like, when does the work really stop? And when do we let it to continue, or to give people the option to move it in different ways? I feel like, in a way, these larger installations have continued to give me the ability to think that I'm still collaborating with people, that I'm giving them a sense of me, and that they're believing that we could create something better. When we made the carousel, it was like a dream come true. This is a work that actually tells time. It's the cycles of life. The beauty of actually creating something that was something of memory became so special. Actually, one of your fellow students here helped me create this work. We made this work in under 4 months with the help of 5 other artists in 4 months. It was a really interesting moment in my life, because after the Whitney, it's almost like people really believed, and they gave me the trust. When I started to present ideas, it was almost like I put myself in a hole that I needed to dig myself out. But the idea of actually challenging myself became so important. I never thought I could have made a carousel, but here it is. It's beautiful. It tells this time of when we are children to when we become adults, and when do we start dreaming, and how does our fantasy take over who we are and allow us to kind of go back into this childhood mode. And I feel like my way of working is a little bit symbolic in that way, where I think of ways of how to kind of let go, but just guide myself through the idea of process. The dragon, once again, always shows back into my work, because I think I'm still learning to defeat that dragon, to understand how to let go, and what is it that I need to let go. Sometimes I think it's the idea of my history, of where I came from, that it's allowed me to kind of create this image of myself, and I've used this idea of life and my experiences. But now I'm asking myself, how do I create new experiences without thinking that I need to always go back and think about those times? The devil, fear, defeat, forget, stand, and then you walk. I stand in front of you, but I don't see you because you don't exist. When I close my eyes, I think of you. It always shows me a picture of myself. I don't exist here, but I walk. My eyes are open, but I'm asleep. I'm an egg without a purpose. I eat your mirror and eat the glass. It shatters my insides. It creates a new beginning. I want to believe that life is real. But who shows you that? Is it the bead or is it the marking of time? When I swing around you, where do you go? It's the merry-go-round. The mirror breaks once again. I ingest it. It cuts my eye. It cuts my heart, but it grows. I build a house, and the wind blows it away. The beams are stronger because they're rooted in the ground. My mother is a pyramid, and she's made me believe. I'll wake up and see that fear is not something I need to believe in, because I can be my own hero. This image here shows my work in a world that I didn't think existed. But these works that are standing in front of each other are a legacy of my family. The ziggurat where these costumes or beings live on is named after my mother. The mural on the side is my grandfather's name, Basilio. When this moment happened, it kind of made me believe that we do come together at one point. For my mom to see this and to think that her aspect of life was next to her dad, who also passed away, became a form of sadness and joy, and was asking me, Raúl, how did you do this? How did you bring us together once again? And I told her, I didn't do it, time did. Our icons and the people we believe in will always be there to influence you. Growing up in San Diego, I stood in front of Nikki de Sanfal, and now I sit next to her in conversation. You have to believe that all of these things will happen, because you never know. The Treasure House of Memory is my latest work, but it's asking me to kind of let go, to find new moods, because each mare tells the time. The mare of threes is when my father died. The mare of nines is when I got a new life. The mare of 33s was when I decided to give myself wings. Thank you, guys. I don't know if we're supposed to ask questions, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any. If not, we can go outside and
Mike will come to you.
take these masks off.
I just want to say thanks for doing this presentation. It was really amazing to see all of it. I was wondering, what's the process for putting together the bead structures? And how would you make them?
I actually use a lot of different processes, but like I mentioned, some of these things have failed so many times, so I guess I don't know, but I'm trying to build a core, so that's kind of the beginning, to kind of make something really substantial, and the beads kind of react as almost like the shield.
So first I want to say thank you for coming by, and also I just really want to show my appreciation to how many times you kind of mentioned your struggles with each work. I feel like, as creatives, it's really liberating to hear that, that it's not just one straight path to what you want to do. But my question is actually related to how you were mentioning that you were kind of lost in trying to rediscover kind of this concept of belief. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you finally found your answer or not.
I think I have, because I feel like in a way, even just being here and understanding that I can talk to you and that we can process a conversation is what's given me the understanding that I have always been lost, but all I needed to do was just kind of really open up my eyes and my instincts to the people around me to believe that all I needed to do was really click my feet and understand that I'm doing the right thing. So in a way, it was just asking myself once again, what are the things that are putting walls in front of me? But I guess that's the moment where I'm asking, what is it that I'm afraid of? And I think it was actually just me, you know? And I kind of just needed to give in to myself in order to believe that the struggle will continue, but I don't have to carry that weight forever.
So with your glass mosaic, I forgot what it was titled. With the flies, I also know you have fly tattoos. Is there any correlation with those two? I just wanted to know.
Well, it's not glass, it's actually acetate, so it's all made out of like vulnerable materials like paper, tape, glue. And the fly, I think for me, when I started thinking about flies, they symbolize the idea of humility, you know, and to think that even these humble materials can shift shape and create something that's not supposed to be used for. So the fly, in a way, is like, to me, the secret of understanding how we can find love in anything and correct it in a way.
Sorry I'm just so curious of like, I want to pick apart your brain, like I just hearing from like what I've been sitting and all this like, wisdom you're spouting, it's incredible. I was just curious, like, I know each person is themselves, right? Everyone has their own story and different experiences, but I feel like as a creative, I feel kind of stuck. Like I feel like there's so much more I can do, and it might be just a part of myself, like comparing with my peers, but it's just like, I don't know how to really grow. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I was wondering if you had any advice.
I think one thing that I've learned from visiting different artists is that there is a moment of feeling stuck. But it's almost like you kind of have to really feel stuck in order to understand how to be out, you know? So it's hard for me to answer that question because I think you're really in this moment of wanting to free yourself. And in a way, art making is a form of freedom. So, you know, when I was trying to make these structures and they weren't working, the act of like pulling them apart became so crucial. Nothing has to be permanent, you know? So if your painting is not working, paint it on a wall and erase it, you know? Continue to use the act of practice instead of trying to create something that's so permanent. Maybe that's what's making you feel stuck, is that you're creating these things that you think should last a lifetime. You know, I would say break things. Break a mirror.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing about your life and about your work. But I mean, kind of like connected to the last point, I was really interested in, you know, the point you talking about, like this kind of, you know, going through your life and at 33, you gave yourself wings. Like, what are exercises that you do in your life to like kind of give yourself freedom, or you know what I mean? Like what are ways that you just kind of coax your body into that? Because it's and I don't mean that to be like, you don't need to answer that question in that way.
Yeah.
It's just an open-ended thing.
I think I mean, I've definitely have asked myself a lot of different questions, and people get surprised when they're like, oh, you talk about struggles a lot. But have had to deal with so many personal aspects of the idea of being happy, because I am happy, but to see the sadness, I think accepting the facets of life has really been a great exercise for me to really understand that there's a possibility, and it's really hard to try to prove to the world that you matter, because I think we're all here and we are vulnerable people. We are those flies that constantly get shut. So I think it's about putting yourself in the shoes that you actually want to be in and seeing that there is a way to kind of overcome. And maybe to think about the facets of like where it all begins is how do you inject yourself into something that's beautiful but tragic at the same time.
Hello, I just want to say thank you because I feel like this presentation really, I don't know if anyone else, but it really lit up my creative spark again, so thank you so much. I study fashion here at UC Davis, so obviously when the picture that Karl Lagerfeld took, I got so excited because if you guys don't know, he's been the creative director of, he died, but he was the creative director of Chanel for decades, and I just want to know more about the experience of, working with him and, what was he like?
Well, I didn't get to personally work with him, but I feel like, when you look at my work, it can come off as kitsch, cheap, thrift store. And there was a lot of times where people were saying, you don't belong, but then when these hierarchy people are seen and letting you know that you belong, it's almost really beyond special. I don't know, I don't make fashion, but the idea of using the works and believing, it's almost like I never would have thought that my name would be presented to Karl and that they would, print this in Vogue or whatever. But I think that's kind of the aspect of the journey of believing that one day, or maybe never, but you believing it, it's almost like, why does it have to be kind of put on this platform of it belongs when it actually does? Oh yeah, I think this.
Actually, I don't know if this is more of a question or a comment about your process. First of all, thank you for this amazing presentation. I was really personally interested in your the kind of communication that you have with your ancestors and your family, and the inspiration you draw from your cultural background, and this interesting fusion of all of it in a way that makes you larger than life, because you can have all these multitudes, and you can exist in all of them and be all of them and none of them at the same time. And yeah, I'm just very interested in what drew you to that sense of creating community within yourself as an artist.
Well, I think it's the idea of holding on to this kind of memory that really, I think, the idea of loss is so important. When we lose someone that we love a lot, how much stronger does their present become when you put emphasis on it? I wear my grandmother's medallion, and I feel like it really is connected to me, and almost like I get to be her at these times, So it's through the idea of care or using specific objects or experiences to kind of channel those ants or those people around you. So I do kind of try to use the world around me to kind of believe that these lives are still here to kind of help me, because I do feel like a guidance through almost like my father and my grandfather, they're the ones kind of pushing me in a way. So it's like never let go of your beliefs, you know, and I think that's why I bring up this aspect of when religion becomes so contradictory that you can't be a part of something, but you actually want to. And I think letting go of these boundaries that are built around us is kind of what puts you back into that reality. Well, okay, it's really hot in here and I'm sweating, so maybe let's go outside.